Hello, everyone, and particularly those who are horror fans. This is Josh with Big Slicks Anything and Everything. And for this video, it's going to be part of my horror series, and this is part one in what's going to be a long running series. I'm starting off with some of my favorite characters and favorite villains and so forth when it regards to horror movies. And for this first one, I decided to go with what I call the Magnificent Seven favorite women heroes of horror. These are basically, whether you want to call them the Scream Queens, the Final Girls. I decided not to use those terms because they're used too much. And I would have used the preferred term probably would have been heroines of horror. But I didn't want YouTube getting cranky about that or anyone to think I was talking about heroin junkies or anything like that. So we decided just to use the term favorite women heroes of horror. Now, these are, of course, my personal preference, my favorites. Yours might not be on there. Maybe some of them, yours do make it on this list. And this isn't in any particular order. These just happen to be 7 of my favorites. And with the exception of the last one that I talk about, she's definitely my favorite. But for right now, 2 through 7 could be in any order. So let's get on with it. So starting off, first we're going to have some honorable mentions. So, and a couple of these are fairly recent. On the left side, we do see Mia Goth as Maxine in the movie X, and that, of course, also had a prequel known as Pearl, and we'll be getting an upcoming sequel to X, that being Maxine. So we'll see how that character goes. In the middle there on the top, we've got Donna from Cujo, played by Dee Wallace Stone. That's obviously a classic Stephen King adaptation. Right below there is the character Tori from the movie Christmas Bloody Christmas, which came out this last Christmas season on Shudder. If you haven't seen that movie, I'd certainly encourage to see that. It's become one of my favorite Christmas horror movies. Then on the far right, one that not too many people would talk about, but the character Maddie in the 2009 Night of the Demons remake. Really enjoyed that movie and really enjoyed that character. So now let's get on with it. First starting, and these are both from 2 of John Carpenter's movies, we have, of course, the OG herself, Laurie Strode from the Halloween series. This is the character who's kind of become the prototype and has certainly set the bar for women in horror. This is the character who has had several different timelines throughout Halloween, which has kind of become a choose-your-adventure book of horror movies. My preferred Laurie Strode timeline is Halloween's 1, 2, and H2O, just because it just gives that character a perfect arc from going from a very timid and shy teenager to a mother by the end of H2O who finally decides to fight back against Michael Myers. Then on the bottom, one that doesn't get talked, I don't think, enough, is Adrienne Barbeau's character, Stevie Wayne, in the movie The Fog. This is a kind of a little bit of a different character because we're not talking about some young high school or college student here. We're talking about a single mother who works the radio station at a lighthouse, and all she's trying to do is keep people away from the danger, away from the ghosts that are inside the fog. So it's certainly, for older people, maybe people that are parents, is certainly a character that is very relatable in that fact and does a terrific job in that movie. On to our next set, and both of these in what I consider the sci-fi horror. There's obviously another one of the early OGs of female heroes in horror, as far as at least in modern horror, and that's Ellen Ripley from Alien. Definitely one of the best sci-fi horror movies of all time. You know, she's great because this character, easily the smartest human character in this movie, and has to use her wits and smarts to outsmart the xenomorph in that movie. And of course, since then has become a cultural icon in that genre. Now, the other one, and you're thinking, probably scratching your head, I have, of course, Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor from the first Terminator. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, Terminator's not a horror movie. Well, that's certainly true of the sequels, but if you really watch that first Terminator, and when I first heard someone even mention that it's like a slasher film, I didn't quite believe them until actually sitting down and watching it. If you look at that movie, and if you take the machine guns, assault rifles away from Arnold's character and give him say a machete or a butcher knife or an axe, it certainly follows everything you would see in your typical slasher film, from the stalking, from the suspense, from the build-up, the fact you have this unkillable killer that just won't die. And of course, throughout that movie, Sarah Connor goes from someone who's as a waitress is spilling coffee on her customer, and by the end she's telling the Terminator, "You're terminated, motherfucker." So she's definitely in one of my top 7 female heroes of horror. Then on to the next, we've got, and of course one of the most legendary slasher series is of course the Friday the 13th series, but particularly this final girl, Jenny, from Friday the 13th Part 2, who many people would agree is considered to be maybe the best final girl or women hero in that series. What makes her so different, I think, from others, not just within that series, but in other series, is the way she's able to use her training in psychology, as she's a psychology student in college, and she uses that training in the background she knows about Jason to outwit and outsmart him and eventually get away from Jason. Of course, no one ever really kills Jason, but she certainly gets away, unlike some of her other friends. And then another one, and this is from another series that a lot of people maybe don't talk enough about, and that is the character Mary Beth from the Hatchet series. Now, Mary Beth was originally played by actress Tamara Feldman, and then Danielle Harris took over that part in parts 2 and 3 of that series. I love this series. It's so over the top and campy, but it essentially gives you everything you want out of just a crazy over the top slasher film to begin with. I love this character because, you know, she may be small in stature, but she's got a heart of a lion and as fierce as one, not to mention she has a mouth like a trucker. I really love it in part 3 of the series, where she pretty much constantly just telling off the police in that movie. And ultimately, she's just a real firecracker. And in fact, come to think of it, she kind of reminds me of my wife in a little bit. So that's another one of my favorite characters as well, and has become a favorite character. That the series certainly has gotten a huge cult following over the years. And if you haven't seen the Hatchet series, I would certainly advise to go ahead and keep an eye on that one. Now, finally, last but not least, and this one's definitely probably my favorite as far as women heroes of horror goes, and that's Kirsty from the Hellraiser series, played by Ashley Lawrence. And there are several reasons why I love this character. Besides the obvious being gorgeous and smart, this character not only has to outwit, survive, and defeat Pinhead himself, but the rest of the Cenobites as well. And on top of that, in the first one, she's got to deal with her evil stepmother, Julia, as well as her demented Uncle Frank, who's come back from the dead, so to speak. And then when you go into part 2 of Hellraiser, she's also got to deal with Dr. Chenard, who first starts off as a sick, twisted psychiatrist, and then becomes a total deranged super Cenobite. Anyway, she's always seems to find a way to outsmart all these villains, so it's not a case of her just trying to deal with one killer. She's got a whole slew of villains she has to deal with, and comes out on top every time. And when I say Kirsty, I'm mainly meaning the Kirsty from parts 1 and 2. Yeah, she had a brief little cameo in part 3, and then there was, of course, Hellraiser Hellseeker, which didn't quite utilize that character enough, and let's be honest, a lot of those direct-to-video Hellraiser movies weren't even really true Hellraiser movies to begin with. So that's pretty much it for this video. Please comment below who are some of your favorites. And also please like, share, and subscribe. And on the next video, we'll be talking about my Magnificent 7 favorite men heroes of horror. So that'll be coming up shortly thereafter. And then we'll be also looking at children heroes of horror as well. Then we'll get into the villains. So until then, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.